welcome back to another episode of the Boropolis Podcast. As always, I'm joined with Nathan, and this week certainly won't be as hectic as last week in terms of the episode. But Nathan, it's still been an exciting week for Boro, and we've got plenty to get into. But firstly, Nathan, how are you doing? Off the
Yeah,
back of this week?
back at uni, as you're about to say there. Yeah, back at uni now. Christmas period's over. Hoping that the changing of environment doesn't necessarily put a curse on Boro's run at the minute. And yeah, we'll see it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, back to reality now, isn't it? Back to uni for you, back to uni for me very soon. And the festivities are over, but once again, Boro have won, so we've got something to smile about. So, obviously, with this week's podcast, we'll be discussing the Mansfield game, the transfer news of this week, and of the last couple of days, and of course, previewing next week's game against Reading. But firstly, obviously, normally I'd ask you about the game of the week, which of course is Mansfield, and we will do that. But because of the way that the podcast fell, before I ask you about team news, and it sort of fits into that category, I suppose, we do actually have a new signing to talk about. So that is Kaelin Boyd Muntz from Birmingham, an Irish international, a Northern Irish international, just to be specific, because I don't want to offend any Irish listeners. But yes, a bit of a shock one, that one, wasn't it, Nathan? And something, to be honest, that hadn't even been rumoured at all anywhere else.
Yeah, it was a strange one at the time. It just sort of popped up on my phone from the Boro Twitter page, just completely unexpectedly, really, which I suppose is kind of a good thing, that Boro are doing the business behind closed doors and nothing's really getting leaked into the press. And yeah, it was a surprise. And I think really not many people knew a lot about him. But the information that we had, 21-year-old midfielder, left-sided midfielder, and obviously that fits in with helping our midfield balance. So good signing all round, really.
Yeah, I think they made quite a lot of it in the actual, like the sort of get to know the new player type post that they put on the Middlesbrough website when a new signing's announced, that he is actually left-footed. And as you say, of course, we've spoken an awful lot about Tav and his left foot and the fact that it adds balance to our midfield. So quite clearly, I don't think, of course, he played yesterday against Mansfield and come straight into the team, but I do think this is more of a signing for the future. As opposed to probably someone that's going to come in and compete with Tav. But nonetheless, a good signing. And as you say, always nice to have a bit of a surprise signing rather than just waiting for that announcement.
Yeah, 100%. And hopefully with this new sort of recruitment team that we have, hopefully we see more of this, transfers that aren't really leaked into the press, and Boro just doing business behind closed doors, because it is good having a surprise. And I suppose when it's not leaked to the press, there's not all sorts of speculation and sort of like the story with Balogun at the minute, where everyone's sort of just waiting for it to happen and thinking, is it going to come now or is it going to come in a few days? So it was a nice surprise to have that one just pop up on our phones.
Yeah, it was. So really now I think what's best for us, now we have that out the way, is to go straight into the Mansfield game. Of course, FA Cup third round. An exciting tie really, because Mansfield going into the game had been on a good run of form. We mentioned that last week. Of course, Boro are in good form at the moment, and it had all the sort of makings of what was going to be your typical FA Cup tie. No one was going to win that game easily. There was going to be plenty of battling, probably a few changes from either side, but a good game all round. And talking of changes, really, of course, Boro did make changes going into the game. It was sort of, a bit of a guessing game as to who may have been available given the COVID outbreak. But just going into a few of the standout selections, really, from Chris Wilder. Firstly, we spoke about Sol Bryn being recalled from Queen of the South last week, but it was actually Joe Lumley that started yesterday, which for me was actually a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I suppose it is a bit of a surprise, but I think listening to Wilder's press conference on Friday, he did say that four players that didn't initially test positive in the group of 10 that tested positive prior to Sheffield United on New Year's Day, 4 new players had tested positive. And I think when we were looking at the preview of this game, we said players like Piero and Bryn had points to prove, and both of them not in the match day squad. So it is a strange one, but with the current situation with the world at the minute, you just never know what's really around the corner, and these players may have tested positive in that number.
Yeah, and from one player that did start to another player which didn't start, Aaron Connolly, of course, he signed last week, wasn't involved. We're yet to have a really confirmed answer as to why he wasn't involved, but there's been a few sort of mutterings about us and Brighton disagreeing on getting the player registered or cup ties. We don't want to speculate too much, but yeah, it was disappointing not to see him involved as well, really.
Yeah, it was, because we all thought that this would be a game to sort of get him up to speed, really, with the way that Chris Wilder wants to play, get some minutes in his legs, because he hasn't really had that this year at Brighton. He only has really played in the cup competitions for Brighton, and really it would have been good to see him play up front. But yeah, just looking at the notes here, yeah, Uche and Coburn up front for Boro. And I think we kind of expected Coburn to be there. Chris Wilder name checked him when he first joined the club and said that he's got a big future. And we've seen in the last week as well, Josh Coburn signed a new long-term deal at the club, which is good news all around, really, tying our good young players down to long-term contracts, and hopefully they continue to develop and thrive.
Yeah, well, just leading us nicely onto there, it's almost as if you knew what I was going to go into next, Nathan. More young players that were involved yesterday. Of course, Joe Gibson, who was been on the bench of late, and William Kokolo as well, both right wing back and left wing back, either of them. And then, of course, we had Nathan Wood, who returned from Hibs just before the start of January, who also come in to that back five. Just again, really nice to see the academy is still producing these players. We've over the years produced a hell of a lot of players and some really good players. So it's always nice to see academy prospects and graduates getting their chance. And it was, as I say, there's always that sort of, although you're not related or not really, you don't have any deep, meaningful connection, there's always that sense of pride when you sort of, an academy product comes through and makes the first start.
Yeah, there is, and I'm sure we'll see plenty more of it in the future. Just a bit of news on the under-23s. They went to QPR last week and won 5-0, which was outstanding, and we're seeing plenty of young players do really well for the under-23 side as well. And I think it's only a matter of time before some of these young players start getting into the first team squad. And hopefully, you never know, these players could become big stars of the future for Middlesbrough in years to come.
Yeah, and just finally on team news, I know we've briefly mentioned it, but of course, Kaelin Boyd come into the team only really 24 hours after signing. I think he said in his post-match interview that it was all a bit of a rush trying to get him registered in time, and we did manage it, and of course he started the game. So going into the action, really, and to be honest, it sort of, usually we talk about how either side start the game, or a few early half chances, but it seemed like straight away, after 4 minutes, the game was alive and kicking, and I think Uche Ikpeazu got that message loud and clear, because after 4 minutes, the ball's punted long, really, and he manages to control it. He then shrugs off 2 Mansfield defenders with ease and fires an absolute rocket into the Mansfield goal and gives Boro the lead, really.
Yeah, fantastic piece of play from Uche, and that's what he's all about. We've said it since he came to the club, really, and gave him a lot of praise for his hold-up play, his physicality, his strength. And wow, what a piece of play from him, picking the ball up. Great touch, rolls his marker. And yeah, two lads either side of him grabbing hold of his shirt, trying to pull him down. And he just, as you say, shrugs him off and puts a brilliant shot into the top corner and got us well on our way, really. And yeah, good celebration from him as well, running over to the travelling fans. I think he kind of was saying he had a bit of a point to prove, pointing to his ear, saying, yeah, have a bit of that, Chris. Maybe I'm not really for sale in this summer, in this winter window, because with strikes like that, I think Wilder will be thinking, maybe Uche could be in the side for a bit longer yet, give us something a bit different. So yeah, brilliant Uche.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you were there again. Me, obviously resuming my part-time fair weather away supporters position of on the sofa in the house. You were obviously there, but just on Uche, you've been quite clear over the past couple of podcasts. There has been speculation linking him with a move away, but you've always sort of backed up his corner, and I don't think physically would need any backing up, Uche, but yeah, you've been there defending him and saying that he does still have a lot to offer. And I think, going into this game, especially in a game that we were always going to make changes in, for players like Uche, Piero, of course he wasn't involved, but had he have been playing, it would have been the same case. It was sort of his opportunity really to say, well, don't forget about me, I'm still here and I can still offer this team a lot. So, I mean, how happy were you to see him do what he did, really?
Yeah, brilliant. Made a real case for himself all day, really. I know I'm just going into the game briefly, but I thought he was a menace all day, really. Picking the ball up, bringing others into play. And that's just what he does, brings others into play with his hold-up play and looks to not get in behind with a lot of pace, because that's just not his game, but looks to just be a menace to defenders with his attributes, which are his strength and physicality. And yeah, he was fantastic all day, really. Even running into channels and putting balls across for other players, he was fantastic.
Yeah, and another player that really stood out for me yesterday, and I know you've briefly mentioned it, well, of course, go into further detail, is actually the debutant, Kaelin Boyd. Of course, he added the second, but a little shout out actually for Joel Gibson, because coming into the team in a position that I don't actually think is all too familiar to him, actually. I think he usually plays a little bit higher up the pitch, slotted in at right wing back, bursts down the right wing, and cuts a perfectly executed ball back to Muntz. And on his weaker right foot, actually, because he is left-footed, as we say, fires in only 10 minutes after Uche had got the opener. So a perfect start for Middlesbrough, really, and a perfect start for Muntz on his debut.
Yeah, it seemed a bit all too routine of a start for Boro, really. It seemed like we were dangerous going forward every time that we did go forward. And yeah, some good play from us down that right-hand side again. Even when it's not Matt Crooks and Isaiah Jones, we always look dangerous down that right-hand side. And this time it was Gibson. Fantastic cutback and a good finish from Boyd Muntz as well on his debut. And yeah, it kind of set us on our way, 2-0 up. Thought that we'd just be in for a sort of a steady day at the races, Boro, but that's just not us at all, really.
It's never the way, as you say, Nathan. And one goal that I think, probably would have put the final nail in the coffin. Of course, it was 3 goals eventually that won us the game. But had we have got that third before half time, I think that really would have, put Mansfield to bed, to be honest, and sort of taken away any hopes of getting back into the game that they did have. The chance, of course, before half time. On the other side, another academy graduate, although I have seen on Twitter today a bit of a debate about what constitutes being an academy graduate, because of course he come into the academy/23 setup after coming from Sunderland. So yeah, that's there to be debated. I don't know if there's a definite definition on that, but nevertheless, a Boro youngster, William Kokolo, left wing back, gets down the line. I thought all afternoon, to be fair, was actually, quite tricky, looked confident on the ball, looked to beat his fullback. Everything really that you'd want to see from a young wing back. Of course, he gets to the byline, cuts one back for Uche, and to be honest, the only thing that prevents Uche getting his second is a quite remarkable save from the Mansfield goalkeeper, to be honest.
Yeah, the keeper's sort of dived the other way, sort of thinking that Uche is going to go far corner, but yeah, he makes a fantastic save considering he's going the wrong way and keeps the score a bit, well, clear enough for Mansfield to get themselves back into the game, which we know what happened in the second half. But yeah, we went in at half time, 2-0 up. And I think towards the end of that first half, there was a bit of Mansfield pressure on Middlesbrough. Not too many clear-cut chances from them in the first half, but you could tell that they were trying to put some pressure on us and build something and get a goal back.
Yeah, of course, and that's exactly what they did straight after half-time, really. Nigel Clough, obviously, was into them at half-time, and he's in typical Nigel Clough fashion, really. And I think his message got to his players straight away because they were out the traps, as I say, very quickly. And to be honest, not long after half-time, after a brief spell of pressure, they pull a goal back. And I don't know if you remember Stephen Quinn. I'm sure you do, in fact. But he used to play for Sheffield United, was at Hull, and I just always remember him as one of them players where, sort of in that Jordan Rhodes type category where he never quite established himself in the Premier League, but was always the sort of top end Championship player and has always had quality in that left foot. And I mean, the ball into Oliver Hawkins that Mansfield pull one back from, it's just a beautiful lofted cross, isn't it? And Hawkins really dominates Sol Bamba in the air and smashes that header straight past Lumley, and that's 2-1.
Yeah, he does, yeah. Great ball from Quinn, hanging it up there just above Sol Bamba, and Hawkins just climbs on the back of him and just nods one in, and stood in the away and just sort of thinking, I thought we were relatively safe, to be fair. Even though we weren't really out the traps quick in the second half, I thought that really, even if we were to concede a goal, which we did, I thought that we could go up the other end quite easily and just get another one. I didn't really think that we were in all too much danger until really later on in the game when Mansfield started putting the pressure on a little bit. And yeah, Joe Lumley made a bit of an error for a goal that was chalked offside. And I haven't seen it back because it's not on any highlights or anything that I've seen. But I don't know why it was called offside. I don't think it was offside, apparently, from what I've seen. From I know it may be a bit biased, but from Mansfield fans saying it wasn't offside. But what was your take on it, Chris, if you did see it?
Yeah, of course, I watched it, and to be fair, even looking back at replays, it was a very tight call. I think Mansfield fans are probably right to feel a little bit annoyed by the decision. And, it was offside in the end. But as you say there, Lumley, who for me looked a little bit shaky, sort of, after a good spell in the team, sort of almost went back to his early season form and looked a little bit suspect from a few crosses, opting to punch and things like that, and spilling a few shots when he probably could have gathered them. And to be honest, I think he's got away with one here. It's Danny Johnson that sticks the ball in the back of the net after Lumley drops it, wheels away in celebration, only to find out that it's offside. But yeah, it was a real let off for us, to be honest, I thought.
Yeah, and of course they keep the pressure on Mansfield, and a ball slipped through the centre of our defence. Nathan Wood is a little bit on the back foot, and Oates is through one-on-one with Lumley. He rounds Lumley and slots home with 5 minutes to go. And at that point, I was in the away and thinking, there's 5 minutes for these to get a winner. And I'm thinking, it could be one of those FA Cup comeback stories that goes down in history, really. But yeah, it was certainly a worry in that away end.
Yeah, I can imagine it will have been. And even watching the game, the tide of the game had really turned by then. As you say, Oates goes through, scores, and just, I know we talk about Boro celebrations often, but just this little mention, Rhys Oates, because just as he's sliding a finish, I don't know if you've seen this back, all in one, he manages to actually celebrate by diving on his chest whilst also sort of watching the ball go into the back of the net. So fair play for Rhys Oates for that, a good finish and a great celebration. But of course, we don't want to be drawn onto that too much. But yeah, the tide of the game had changed at this point. And as you say, I was sitting and thinking, really, the next goal in this game is probably going to go to Mansfield, because they had all the pressure on Middlesbrough's back line. I think not only Lumley, really, but Middlesbrough's back line all day. For me, of course, you were at the game, so it's often quite different, the feeling inside the stadium. But looked like, even when we were 2-0 up, there was a few moments where I thought, that is a little bit worrying. There was a few times where there was a few misplaced passes. I don't think, without being too critical, it's a game that Nathan Wood will want to watch back in a hurry. I don't think Sol Bamba particularly had his best game in a Middlesbrough shirt. And just really the balance, I know we talk about balance in midfield, but the balance of also having Peltier in there and having a lot of right footers just looked like it affected us a little bit yesterday. And yeah, as you say, that final 5 minutes, I thought if a goal was going to go anyway, it was going to be going to the home side.
Yeah, and there was 7 minutes added on as well. Stood in the away and thinking, this would just be typical. Cockalo had pulled up with an injury. It was at the other end of the pitch, but it looked like he was holding his hamstring as he was walking off. I'm not too sure, but yeah, best wishes to him, and hopefully he's not suffering too long of a layoff. But Chris Wilder throughout the second half did make changes. Tavernier came on, Crooks, Hernandez, Isaiah Jones, and I'm sure there was another one, but it's not coming to me. But yeah, you could tell really that those changes were just to sort of get the minutes back in the legs of the players that had suffered from COVID in the last week. And they made the difference in the end. A ball slipped in behind by Howson, and Isaiah Jones is up against, I think it was Hawkins, actually, the one who netted Mansfield's first goal. And you could just tell that Hawkins was suffering from playing 90 minutes against our forward line, and there was no chance he was going to be stopping Isaiah Jones. He did try to nudge him off balance, and for a second you thought that Isaiah Jones was going to go to ground, but he carried on, paced to the byline, and puts a fantastic ball across the 6-yard box, and just a bit of a scuffle from Mansfield players, and it bundles into the net. But if it wasn't for them, Onel Hernandez is there to tap home, really, and Boro win the game, win the tie, or in the next round, but really suffer a bit of a scare at Mansfield. I think it was a bit of a scare, and really, on the balance of things, I think that extra time would have been fair enough.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And just on Isaiah Jones, I mean, of course, since we last recorded the podcast as well, Chris Wilder and Isaiah Jones both winning December awards for the SkyBet Championship monthly awards. And, Isaiah Jones often it's seen as a bit of a curse for a few games after the awards have been given, but it certainly wasn't there to be shown with Jones, who, of course, as you say, skips past Hawkins. And again, really, it was something that, as he was first coming at the team, was somewhat questioned a little bit, Jones's end product. But over the past sort of 2 or 3 games, he's really just found that end product. And yeah, as you say, it was going to be tapped in by Hernandez, but Jones just puts it in that perfect area where it's more than difficult for the Mansfield defenders to try and clear it. And in the end, it just becomes bundled home. And yeah, I don't want to say get away with one, but certainly we survive a scare, as you say, Nathan, because quite easily that game could have gone to extra time, and with the home support, I think Mansfield would have put added pressure on in extra time and probably look to take the game to penalties and cause a bit of an upset.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And on the balance of things in that second half, I thought Mansfield did deserve their 2 goals. They were very threatening, really, with long balls and balls in behind. They did have a few other chances. I think Oates had a header that he put over the bar. There was a free header pretty much on the 6-yard box that he's put over the bar, which he really should do better with and should be burying. But yeah, Boro had a few chances in the second half. Crooks put one into the side netting that stands out, and there was a few other ones, but really Boro survive a scare. But we're in the next round of the cup, and the winning run continues, even with a squad that in the last week has been depleted by COVID and was filled with academy graduates making the debuts. It can be quite the occasion to go to like a League Two ground, make your debut where there's a full house there and they're looking to upset a bigger team. And yeah, I thought all the academy graduates and Kaelin Boyd, who was making his debut, all made really good accounts of themselves. And yeah, we're in the next round.
Yeah, we are. And, I was going to mention this at the end of the podcast, but because of the time of recording, of course, we know what lies ahead for Middlesbrough. It will be a trip to either Manchester United or Aston Villa. Of course, that game will be played on Monday night. Of course, when the podcast gets uploaded, it may have been played or it may be about to be played. But yeah, I mean, either or, of course, there's the obvious draw to Manchester United. And, it would be pretty special to see an occasion like we have in the past where, 10,000 Middlesbrough fans are in that Old Trafford away end again. So I think deep down everyone's really hoping for that. But, Aston Villa themselves, they've just signed Philip Coutinho and look like they're about to sign Lucas Digne. So either is going to be a very difficult game, but will be backed heavily by Middlesbrough supporters, as the team always is. And to go to a Premier League away ground is always a bit special in the FA Cup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. We've had our fair share of good cup games in the last few years. I mean, we say the last few years, in the last like 7 or 8. I'm saying now it feels like yesterday, really, with Man City away under Karanka with that playoff team. Of course, Manchester United in the League Cup. What an occasion that was, with 10,000 Boro fans in that away end. It was outstanding, and who knows? We'll have to see what goes on in their game tomorrow. But it's either Cristiano Ronaldo, Manchester United, or Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa, and both will be fantastic occasions, whoever that may be.
Yeah, as you say there, there's one man that everyone immediately thinks about now, given his return to Manchester United. But I'm sure Dale Fry will be watching that cup draw tonight, thinking, well, probably had more difficult tests in the Championship. So yeah, I've probably just cursed Dale Fry there, but I'm sure Dale will be up for the occasion if it is Man United, and Cristiano Ronaldo will face his toughest test that he's ever faced, probably.
Probably, yeah.
So Moving on from the Mansfield game and the Cup, the week that's just gone by, of course, we're in January. There's lots of links cropping up here, there, and everywhere. And this week, it's sort of become apparent that Folarin Balogun of Arsenal is going to sign for Middlesbrough, pending a medical, really, of course. We've had that confirmed by our new mate of Boropolis, Fabrizio Romano. And yeah, it looks like he will be joining Chris Wilder's team on loan until the end of the season. I mean, I think we've spoke about it previously, given that he's been linked for quite a while, but you know, the Balogun loan signing, fingers crossed that it goes through, looks incredibly exciting, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's certainly got a lot of Championship fans excited about the prospect of Folarin Balogun in the Championship, and got a lot of Championship fans rattled as well by it in a certain podcast. But yeah, it is what it is. Going into it, there's been reports this week that Boro are going to be paying the full wage packet of Balogun, which is £40,000 a week. But there is mention of no loan fee, which is fair enough, really. It works out as something like £800,000 for this part of the season, the remainder of the season. And really, there's no need for anyone to be concerned with the fees involved, really. If Middlesbrough couldn't afford his pay packet, then we simply wouldn't be signing him, would we? So I think it is very exciting. His record in Premier League 2 is unbelievable, really. Averaging this season more than a goal a game in that division for Arsenal, which is fantastic. And hopefully he can continue that form for Middlesbrough in the Championship if he signs.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because of course we don't want to put any curses on potentially ruining the chances of this signing going through. But it does look advanced. All the reports that we're hearing and what we've been told is that it is nigh on done. But I say nearly done, because nothing's done until you see Balogun holding or pictured with Chris Wilder. I should say holding a shirt. That sounds like he would be holding Chris Wilder, which he may be doing. I'm not sure what the announcements will be like these days. There's some quite out there ones. So who knows? Maybe he will be holding Chris Wilder in the photo. That would be quite something, wouldn't it, Nathan?
Yeah, God.
But just tonight, actually, probably the reason why Balogun hasn't been confirmed. Arsenal confirmed tonight that he wasn't involved in their cup tie, and I don't think he probably will have been involved had he have not had this have not happened. But he has returned a positive COVID case, so of course that has put a slight delay on that matter. Let's just hope, obviously, early next week we can get that deal wrapped up and announced. Moving on to the next link of the week, and this really is quite a weird one, actually, because for a number of weeks now it's been sort of, you know, muttered on forums and on social media, but there's actually been no sort of actual link by any credible journalist or any newspaper or any outlet until late last night. And that's, of course, Riley McGree of Charlotte FC. People probably know him better off for being on loan at Birmingham earlier on this season. But the Australian international last night was supposedly on the verge, really, of signing for Middlesbrough until today, where it's sort of done a full spin on its head. And now it looks like he might actually be heading to Celtic. But just your thoughts on the potential of Riley McGree joining Middlesbrough?
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting signing. A lot of Birmingham fans seem to rate him quite highly after his period on loan at Blues. I think from what I've seen of him, he's a progressive midfielder, quite keen to carry the ball into the attacking third. And his numbers aren't top Championship level, but they are relatively good. like goals and assists, not any sort of dribbling stats or whatever. I'm not too sure about them, but yeah, strange reports last night saying he was very close to signing for Middlesbrough, and then today the fee has changed. It's an extra million, and he's off to Celtic. So it's an interesting one. Who knows where he'll end up?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, as you say, and there's lots of conflicting reports. Obviously, today, I mean, there's been a few sources say that Celtic is his next destination. Of course, it would make sense given the Australian connection and Ange Postecoglou at Celtic, who of course used to be involved with Australian football. And yeah, I mean, it's a signing that I would like to see from what we saw earlier this season. His performance alone at the Riverside, he stood out for me for Birmingham and was a thorn in our side really all afternoon when they got that result earlier this season, as I say. And yeah, I'd like it to happen, but of course, you know, hopefully he doesn't join Celtic, but it looks as though that is going to happen. Moving on to the final and perhaps most bizarre link of the transfer window so far, really brought back feelings of the summer for me because I was back on Google Translate trying to understand what was going on. And from left field during the week, an Italian outlet, I think it was a Roma sort of fan site, with quite a substantial following, claiming that it was an exclusive, that Davide Santon was of interest to Middlesbrough and that his future was being decided by Roma over the next week or so. And Middlesbrough were one of the clubs mentioned. So, I mean, ex-Newcastle player, Nathan, but what were your thoughts when that one come out? Because it certainly wasn't a player. To be honest with you, I forgot that Davide Santon even existed.
Yeah, it's certainly a very strange link. If you look at our sort of recruitment policy that has been evidenced by links this winter and towards the end of the summer as well, I don't think Santon really fits that bill really. Of course, he's a bit older than the names mentioned just in this podcast. You look at Balogun and McGree being in their early 20s. Santon's obviously been around the block a bit, being at Newcastle in the Premier League a few years ago, and obviously now at Roma. So I'm not entirely sure if there's all too much in that one, but yeah, it'd be a strange one because I'm not entirely sure at this current moment in time if Neil Taylor's still contracted to Middlesbrough or if his contract's up. Of course, he was only signed on a short-term deal until January, and then we were assessing. Of course, we spoke in the last podcast last week about a few clubs being mentioned, but I'm sure that'd just be sort of agent trying to tout him about a little bit and sort of put more hats in the ring to try and speed the deal up with Middlesbrough. But yeah, it's certainly a strange link with Santon, and who knows what'll happen with that.
Yeah, who knows, as you say. And to be honest, you know, as you say there, the Neil Taylor situation has sort of, like the Riley McGree saga, we're going to call it, already, after 2 days, it's already become a transfer saga. Um, you know, 1 minute Neil Taylor is on the verge of signing a new deal and it looks as though he's going to stay. And then, you know, occasionally we do see the odd link. I think West Brom and Coventry have been mentioned. They're two of the clubs that have been talked about with regards to Taylor. And yeah, I hope Neil Taylor stays. I think he's looked all the player that we sort of expected, really, a steady Eddie, someone that can compete with Bowler and someone that is perfect really for when Bowler isn't in the team. So yeah, as I say, I hope he does stay, but if Neil Taylor does leave the club, then, you know, Santon potentially, I don't know what kind of wages he'll be on, but I'd expect them to be probably more so the higher end of our wage structure. So yeah, given his age and that factor on his wages as well, it doesn't really seem the most of reliable of links. But of course, should he sign, he provides competition for left wing back and right wing back, and he certainly has pedigree at the level he's played at. So yeah, we'll wait and see how that one unfolds. Really, I think that's really it for transfer news. And this week, of course, the way that we record the podcast once every week, it's quite difficult because, you know, we have to sort of recap, and probably by the time we finish recording this tonight, there'll be a new link of someone else that hasn't previously been mentioned. But yeah, it is difficult at the moment, but yeah, we'll try and keep on top of all of that stuff. Moving on to next week, back into league action, Nathan, back at the Riverside, and it's Reading at home. A difficult. I'm not. Now, I don't want to muddle my words up here and say it's going to be a difficult challenge, because from the league table alone, you would look at that game and think that Middlesbrough should be looking at the fixture and thinking that is a game, if you want a challenge at the top of the table, that we should be winning. But the sort of pessimist in me almost made myself say a difficult game, because I know our record of predicting results so far on this podcast. So yeah, a different challenge, I should say, I'm going to call it, with Reading up next to the other side. Of course, they had their own FA Cup upset, but were actually knocked out by Kidderminster in the third round. They currently sit 21st in the table. Nathan, I can see that little grin already, because it has all the hallmarks of a game that Boro should win, but it's never normally that easy, is it?
It's not. You're right. I will be trying my best to get Louis, who I did an earlier preview in the season with for Reading games. I'll try and get him on this week to do a preview of this game. But he's not a happy bunny at the minute, and neither are a lot of the Reading fan base, with a lot of things going on at that football club, from the owner to the manager. There was videos yesterday at Kidderminster of Reading fans being very vocal towards the manager that they want him out. Of course, they've been deducted points this season for breaking financial fair play, and they find themselves on the verge of the drop zone, really. Last week, they were 2-0 up against Derby at home, looking like a big 3 points for them, sort of pull away from that bottom three. And 5 minutes to go, things just capitulated for them. 2-2, 2 points dropped. And yeah, they're not on great form at the minute. They've had a COVID outbreak over Christmas, and they didn't play a game from the 11th of December up until last week. I'm sure it was Wednesday. So they had a good 3 weeks off. They've got a lot of fixture congestion coming up. One game they've got a game in midweek this week. Before coming to the Riverside, they've got Fulham, which won't be an easy game for them against a side that are looking to bounce back and obviously get promoted. So yeah, all things aren't really going to plan at Reading at this current time. But as I say, I'll try and get Louis on this week to give us the full lowdown on Reading.
Yeah, well, from what we have seen of Reading, you know, they do play a 5 at the back formation, and you know, I sometimes mention this on the podcast and then soon realise that just about every other club in the Championship and the full of the EFL play a back 5, really. So it's no surprise that they do opt for that formation. But straight away, you know, we mentioned him earlier on in the season. Their star man really is John Swift. A great goal scoring record, 8 goals, 9 assists so far this season. But for me, you know, despite the stats, one man that terrifies me for all the wrong reasons, is Andy Carroll. Now, of course he's got his Newcastle connection, but they brought him in on a free, didn't they? And I don't know what it is, but in the similar mould of the likes of Robert Earnshaw, Martin Waghorn, there's a couple of other, the types of Championship strikers where you just think they'll score against us. He just reeks of that, to be honest. And yeah, as I say, Andy Carroll, his aerial presence, it does scare me a little bit. And he's already got a goal and assist to his name in Reading colours. So, given his connections to the local area, I'm sure he'll be massively up for the game.
Yeah, he will be. He is just one of those players that can always pop up with a goal. Just even if he's on a complete barren run, he can just there can just be a ball floated in there off a free kick, and he's winning it every single day of the week. And he nearly scored one against Derby last week for them. Just towered over his defender and looked to head one into the ground and test the keeper, which keeper made a really good save actually. But yeah, I remember when he was at West Ham, we played West Ham in the Premier League. Carroll didn't really get into the West Ham side all that much because of his injury record at the time. But of course he played at the Riverside, and I remember them getting a set piece and they just floated one in, a free kick, and no one else was winning that ball, and Carroll just planted a header into the goal in front of the North Stand. And it was just typical that Andy Carroll, being a Geordie, would score at the Riverside, and we'll be hoping this weekend that does not happen.
Yeah, definitely. That ponytail does give me nightmares, to be honest. Just think of him wheeling away just in front of the North Stand. As you say, he's already scored once at the Riverside. And even in his Newcastle days, I know in the season where, of course, us and Newcastle were relegated to the Championship, I seem to remember him, even as a young Andy Carroll, causing us problems. So, yeah, we've probably spent a little bit too much time on Andy Carroll, but if you know what Middlesbrough are capable of, and you know what types of players often cause them problems, then Andy Carroll is the player that Middlesbrough fans should be worried about, to be honest.
It is completely. And I think despite all the typical Boro sort of mantra that comes with this football club, I think it will be a game that we'll be looking to target 3 points again. And I know it's cliche, but we'll always look to try and get wins and always look to get 3 points. But Reading, a side down there struggling, a side that haven't really got going this season, although they did beat us earlier in the season under Neil Warnock. It's got to be a target for 3 points, really. Hopefully, we're sort of back to full strength by then. Some players didn't make the squad that would usually be in the squad for Mansfield, but hopefully in the next week we're fully recovered. Hopefully we may have some new signings through the door as well that could feature, and hopefully we go into the game on Saturday at the Riverside eyeing 3 points, and hopefully we get those 3 points to keep us ticking over.
Yeah, and I think with that, Nathan, that brings us to the end of a slightly shorter version of the Boropolis podcast this week, of course. I don't think we were ever going to outdo the time that we put up last week with all of the fixtures and COVID outbreaks and all sorts that went on. But yeah, good to be back recording the podcast, of course, after New Year. Looking forward to the rest of the transfer window, of course. Yeah, before we go, as we usually like to do, we should just say, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, just a quick shout again, Twitter Space on a Thursday night, live at 7:30. Myself and Nathan, just the week gone, we had Dom Shaw from the Gazette on again. We just talked about the Borough, really, more of a relaxed sort of chat, get a few people on to have their say. So please join us for that. Audio listeners, give us a review and rate us 5 stars, because, you know, not only does it help other Boro fans finding us, but it's just nice to have 5 stars. So again, to wrap that up, from me and Nathan, thank you very much for watching and listening to the Boropolis Podcast again, and we will see you next week with another episode.